Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay Svetlik and I am a minister in discernment here in the United Church of Christ. I serve in Moline, Illinois at a wonderful church called Hope United Church of Christ, and these people are very near and dear to my heart, and they have been extremely good mentors during this process. And I think about how the many churches that I have served as a youth director, faith formation director, however you would like to phrase that. But I think about all the ways in which they interpreted being welcome to, and I'm going to put these in air quotes, all, and how they interpret that. And the things that they may have done, the things that they've, that they succeeded on, or they had to kind of go back to the drawing board with. But there's a theme that always comes across to me is what it means to really articulate and understand the first impression. The first impression is something that I have worked with my entire life because for 20 years I was a hairstylist, and so I had to think about the first impression during that time of standing behind the chair and working with individual clients. I had families, I had friends that referred other friends and stuff like that. So there's a first impression that really matters. And then also during that time, I was a manager, and, I really kind of honed in on what a first impression means and how, my stylist at the time could really grow the business that they really admired and they had a passion to do. And so we went through a series of exercises, and there was a series of things that I would implement so that they could see things from a different perspective. And so when it comes to churches, and anytime that, these big questions have been asked of like, how do we welcome people in, and how do we make a space better for the people that are worshiping with us? But also it's the question of how do we retain, right? It's the how do we keep them in this spot? And one thing I would just tell people to do is, one, form kind of a task force of people that represent like the entire aspect of the church. Don't just have the people that are on council do it, or the people on just one group do it, because birds of a feather flock together. We all know that. It is really good to have everybody that sees it differently, has different perspectives, to kind of engage into a new environment. And so I suggest everyone to build a task force where they set out and go to all different kinds of churches. Write down the things that they liked, not necessarily the things that they would implement, but the things that they liked, because there's a feeling that comes with how we are accepted into, unknown environments. And there's just a whole gamut of things. And then when you come back to the table, you get to kind of discern some of those. And I have, there's one big question that I always ask, and I'll kind of go through that. Because a lot of times we often love to share everything that we do. Share everything we do and how we do it, and we're so proud, we're so loved, and we do all these things, right? And we forget the amount of anxiety and fear and anxiousness anxiousness, but we forget the courage it took for some people just to walk across that, the sanctuary threshold, right? And we forget that because we become so invested into the church itself. Our church, the church that we love, the church that we want to share with others. We become so invested in that we kind of forget that these people that are maybe searching for a church for the very first time, something that happened in their life that jolted them into thinking about where their faith lies in their life, right? Or how strong their faith is, and are they spiritual or religious, or, there's just a gamut of things. They've been hurt in the past by a faith community just for who they are, I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and there's a lot of people within my community that have been church hurt so bad that, sometimes they'll just look at me like, we love, yeah, you've given me some type of spirituality, but that doesn't mean that they feel like they are healthy enough to walk into a church. And so first impressions are incredibly important. And when people are visiting for that first time, they are going to be on high alert on who you are as the people within the church. Because a lot of times it doesn't have anything to do with the liturgical part of it. It's like who the people are. And so when a visitor comes in, I usually suggest just to ask, is this your first time visiting with us today? It puts the ball back in their court, and it also gives them a little control on why they're there. It kind of gives them a space to where they can kind of talk about why they're there. And a lot of times this is where you're going to find out some information about them. If it's a yes, that this is the first time that they've been there, that they're visiting your church, that they're taking that step. A lot of times I'll ask them, how did you hear about us? Asking that question gives you an open-ended book of a lot of where they're coming from. Okay? So we know today most of our churches are online. And people will sit online and watch you during their own time or during the specific time, but they'll watch you online, and they'll hear what's being said in the worship. They'll hear how the pastor is delivering it. They'll see all the other people involved in the worship. They'll see maybe some of the people that are sitting in the sanctuary. And notice I didn't say pews. But sitting in the sanctuary, and, they'll see those bits and pieces. So sometimes it's online, right? Okay, so if they've seen you online, then, you have a series of questions to ask. Oh, well, thank you for coming in person. We enjoy you being here. Building that conversation. And that's where you start building a relationship. Sometimes, they have maybe entered into a different part of their life. And so they're, maybe they have children now, and, they want to get into a faith community. And so they searched, right? They searched up maybe, the LGBTQ issue is important for them. And so they wanted to make sure that that's what, we're all about, or what have you. And so maybe they searched you, and maybe what they saw online is what they liked. And so they decided to come in. Or maybe you guys did something, the church did a service project and it got in the news. And somebody is like, I kind of like what they did. That might bring them in as well. Or they've just been invited. I don't know. I talk to a lot of people and I hand them cards and say, you're always invited to come and sit with us. And so those are really personal things, right? That this is a part where we get to learn about who they are, but also we get to understand like what they're looking for. And so once you start to gather that information, that's great. And then you kind of have to put in place tools for them to feel at ease, where they're not having to guess all the things that are happening. And so I've been in some churches that, only have a bulletin. And I've been in churches that don't have a bulletin, but everything's on the screen. The church I serve now has both. And there is positives and negatives for all of those pieces. Every single one of them, there's a positive and a negative. But what I like to do is explain to somebody when handing them a bulletin, or saying, we do not use bulletins, but we have everything on the screen. It is good to explain kind of the overarching way of things go. Now, if you're doing a bulletin, you let them know that, say the asterisk in the bold print is everything that, the congregation says. And then what's not in it is what, the worship staff does. And, like the standing up and sitting down or stuff like that, just kind of giving them an overarching idea. Also understanding that if they have kids with them, you guys prepared, the coloring pages for the week that match the story, or we have quiet bags, or we have a space within the worship space that, that kids can sit and crawl on the floor and all of that stuff, because it's a space designated for them. Kind of give them that, information. Now, a lot of people would really like to introduce them to others. And I have found when I've done that on a first visit, that is really overwhelming. Their anxiousness is already there, so that's just really overwhelming for them. And it kind of takes away from all the things that you just told them of how the worship goes and stuff like that. And then kind of after you get them settled and stuff like that, you just mention to the pastor, if you can, that we have visitors. And I say mention it to the pastor because the pastor's got a million things going on in the morning. So, they might not realize that right away. Or it's just a good thing to remind it. And it's good communication as well. Communication is key when it comes to first impressions. But let's just say this is the second time they've been in. And I know a lot of members, they tend to get a little like, I don't want to insult them that I didn't see them before. I don't want to, make them feel bad about it. And first, you have to stop making decisions for other people. That's one. Two, it's okay to ask somebody, is this the first time you've visited? And if it's not, ask them what brought them back. You can always frame it as, hey, what brought you back to us? And when doing so in such a kind and loving way, you have this, you'll have this ease that came over because you're putting the ball back in their court a little bit to give them a little bit more control over a conversation. And so once you start doing that, once you've asked that, and then, ask them, so since you've visited us before, is there any questions that have arose since then? Is there anything I can direct you to? Is there anything I can help you with? This is really good because it gives them to know that you are concerned and want to care for them. And that's really important to do. I've done that many times in my life just because of the fact that when I was behind the chair, I always had to ask questions. And I don't, you have to ask questions so that you can just be informed, right? So you can be informed so they can feel like you care about it, so they can feel that warm, fuzzy atmosphere of that worship space, of that church. And also giving them the bulletin. Maybe there's something new in the announcements. Maybe there's something new or a change that's happened in the worship. It's really good to just kind of do that overarching, giving them the tools that they need to feel a little bit more comfortable and safe. Information, this goes on both sides of the yes or the no, or I've been here, I have been here, that kind of thing. Making sure they know where the restrooms are, and if you guys have fellowship afterwards, letting them know where it's at. The last thing anybody wants to do is have to search for something in a space that they don't know. And they really have a hard time, too, telling somebody else what they're there for. So you just want to make sure that they know about the space that they're in. So restrooms, number one. A lot of times people go to a restroom because they're feeling overwhelmed or anxious and they want to pull themselves out of that environment for a minute. So it's good for them to know. And we also want to help people get over that part of it, or not over it, but be able to recognize it and understand that we're going to have anxiety about these things. We just are. And then if they've been there a couple times, that's when you start introducing them to people. And don't just introduce them to the go-getters, right? Maybe introduce them to the people that aren't as involved. Because there's a commonality there, right? They get to talk to somebody, and then they also get to ask questions to that member of what's happening and things like that. So it opens up conversation, which is really good, and that's what you really want. And I think it's really important of what you put in your liturgical setting. I think it's extremely important that we are saying, because of who you are and where you are in life's journey, you are welcome here. And you live that every single day. You as a person of faith within that church, you live that every single day. That is the most important piece of it all. How you conduct that, how you live that, how you show that will make all the other things easier. So I hope this helps. I enjoyed talking about it because it's something that's always been in my wheelhouse. But I want you to, just kind of thinking that overarching understanding of what a first impression is, and then live with your faith, understanding how all of that matters to other people, how that matters to your own soul and your own spirit, your own faith, your own journey. And just be open-armed. Because we're all people and we all make mistakes. We all make good things. We do everything, right? We're not perfect, and we're not supposed to be perfect, because there would be no place to learn if you were. But those are the ways in which we can provide the first impression, and we can be a church of belonging. Thank you, and I hope that helps.